Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Today is January 17th, and this is the Friday broadcast. I typically go live every Friday around 10 or 11 in the morning Central Time, and I read from a piece that I feel is relevant to what's going on in today's world. If you would just bear with me for 1 minute, I'm going to head over to Substack and let my followers on Substack know that I am now live. Um, and if you would like to comment and let me know that I am coming through loud and clear, that would be helpful. Great. I've got the chat open. So, as you can see from the description, I'm going to talk about something called a whole of society approach. And what I want to do is also talk about something that really disturbed me that I saw happened to Alison McDowell. So let me just get back over to Substack and let everybody know that I'm live. Let's see. Bear with me here. Sorry, guys. I hope everybody's doing well and getting ready for a great weekend. We are supposed to be getting snow next week, which is crazy in the Gulf Coast. I guess that's not a normal occurrence. So here we go. I'm just going to go ahead and put that link into the Rumble channel. We have left the Meta brand, all Meta brands. So that means that our follower count has greatly diminished, but we're totally fine with that. We made that decision when we got the email from Meta back in November that talked about how they were going to increase their language learning models, and that they were going to continue to feed into AI systems with or without the permission of their users. And to us, that just felt like it was taking it too far. So we just abandoned Meta altogether. We lost a lot of followers who didn't follow us over to YouTube or follow us over to Rumble or Substack. And I think it's just because there is some kind of addiction going on there, and if they were at all interested in viewing these Friday readings, they would have followed us. And I think it was just too easy for them to follow us on the Meta brand, which is Facebook or Instagram, rather than follow us over to these other platforms. And that's that was part of the whole social media experience, right? Was to make things really simple. And everything comes at a price, though. If it's a little bit too good to be true, then it probably is. And I think that's where we are with Facebook, and where we are with some of these other social media platforms, where things just seem to be really easy to it's really easy to integrate or to interact with on these platforms, a little bit too easy. Just like one or two clicks of a button and you're exactly where you want to be. Kind of like Amazon. It's a little bit too easy to buy things off of Amazon when it's just one or two clicks, and then within 2 days, 2 or 3 days, maybe a week, you get whatever it is that you're looking for, as opposed to making the effort and seeking it out, getting on a crosstown bus, going to a store, dealing with employees who may be difficult to interact with. So in general, and speaking of a whole of society approach, in general, the way we interact, the way we meet our personal needs has completely changed, and it's radically changed as of 4 or 5 years ago in the age of COVID, right? So, and all of this has come, some of it has come very overtly, like we can really see those changes dramatically. And some of the changes have come slowly over time, so much so that we don't even notice that they're happening. So I want to just, make sure that I say hi to our patrons and our Rumble followers and our Rockfin followers. And for those of you who have found me from following me on Twitter, I really appreciate you coming on board and checking us out. Just a really quick recap about this platform. We have been on this platform on this page, Book of Hours, for about probably 6 or 7 years. We really came into our stride, though, during the 2020 experience, where we started to archive history as everybody was experiencing COVID or something with that they were told was COVID. So we took some of our skills, which is video making skills, and our deep understanding of marketing and manipulation, and also the corporate world, and we applied our knowledge of that to the COVID experience, because we realized that many of our followers, I think, don't have a corporate background. They don't understand, uh, not because they're dumb or anything, but just because that's not where their lives took them, So we process things a little bit differently than most of the video essayists out there. We offer a different kind of perspective. And I think that came through in the work that we did between 2020 and 2023 or so. There's a lot of video essays we did, one of which I will reference a little bit later in this broadcast. Called Lifelong Learning. But the in continuing the last week's Friday reading, sorry about that. In continuing last week's Friday reading, where I was reading from this book called The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, which I may pick up again in future broadcasts, I wanted to, continue to go where I feel led. And where I feel led is to have this discussion about um, how everything, this whole of society approach, seems to be about killing us, killing our cities, killing the way we interact with each other, killing our bodies, literally killing us, poisoning us to death, or impoverishing us to death, or putting us in situations where we feel that we have to even take our own life. And these are difficult conversations for people to have. These are conversations that nobody is actually having. It's almost like it's taboo. It's not something you bring up, at Thanksgiving dinner. So, hey, about that whole of society death grip, how's that going for you? That's not something that people would normally talk about. But I think that we can see it happening very clearly in our experiences and the way that we interact um, in the world. I think that for instance, one of the more subtle ways that um, this sort of whole of society death grip on us and this death goal was through the ways that families treated each other during the 2020 and then maybe 2021 COVID experience. First, it was, you can't come to Thanksgiving dinner because you could have a pathogen, or you could have a virus, and if you do, you have to follow all these weird rules. We need you to wear a mask, or we need you to show us a proof positive that you have a negative test. And so this is really demoralizing and really demeaning and humiliating to individuals who felt that their families really loved and respected them and cared for them. Your mother tells you your whole life that she respects your choices and that she supports everything that you do in life. And whatever decisions you make, she will fully be behind you. So when the COVID experience happened and suddenly your mother's like, well, you can't come to Thanksgiving dinner unless you show me proof of proof of a negative COVID test. Suddenly that has shattered your illusions about your family and how much do they really support you and do they really like the choices you made. Suddenly everything, your whole world was turned upside down, and for a lot of people that led them into some terrible depressing dark places, and maybe they went to alcohol or drugs in order to ameliorate the pain the from feeling so shocked by the way that their family was treating them. So that's considered a whole of society sort of death goal and death approach. I am going to read an article that I read a while ago, but I wanted to come back to it. It's from Tablet Magazine that talks more about the specifics and sort of the science behind the whole of society approach. There is somebody else who has talked about the whole of society approach quite a bit in the past, and it was one of the reasons I started listening to him, and that was Mike Benz. And he doesn't need any shout outs. He has enough followers and enough money. He's totally fine on his own. But I do want to at least acknowledge the fact that he is a good reference. You can go back to his discussions and his feeds from the past, and especially on Twitter, and learn a lot about like the details and the governments, and especially the intelligence agencies, um, whole of society approach to governing or managing. Because I don't managing us as citizens, because where we our position on this platform is that we're not really governed. Our position on this platform is that we're extremely contemptuous of the government, of any state. We believe that the way the United States is run is that we are managed by corporate interests, and we're managed as if we are bad employees. And the only way to keep us in line and to keep us doing exactly what they want is to use this whole of society approach where, you've got ad campaigns that are on a loop on all of your favorite streaming platforms like Hulu or Netflix. Or even if you go to the grocery store, you'll hear ad campaigns on a loop through the sound system. So that's one way of doing this whole of society approach and changing your behavior and getting you to do things or buy things or behave in ways that you probably wouldn't normally do. Um, and also to get you to fall under some sort of pressure from your family, like I was saying before. The tech industry made more money than any other industry during the first couple of years of the COVID operation. And that was largely in part due to the fact that people were running out and getting the tests. They were getting testing done. And one of the ways that people felt that they needed to get a test done is because grandma said so. You know, it wasn't like the CIA or Elon Musk or anyone in the tech industry came knocking on your door and said you need to take this test. No, it was Granny. She was like, "Well, you got to come take a test if you want to have Thanksgiving with me." So that's a whole of society approach. And Granny didn't know that she was putting another, $10 billion into the pockets of the tech industry. So, I hope that she felt it was worth it. So this whole of society approach doesn't benefit you, of course. It doesn't benefit me. It doesn't benefit anyone. It only benefits the corporations that are invested into um, whatever it is that they've decided to deploy on us, whether it's a story about a virus, a story about climate change, a story about, inequality, whatever, you know, as long as they benefit in the long run from it. So let me go ahead and see if I can share my screen here and get into this article. Um, there it is. Okay, so you guys should be able to see that. I have read this in the past, but I'm going to read it again. And it's been a while, so I'm sure that I will learn some new things. But this is called Learn This Term Whole of Society. Your or you cannot understand what's going on with American politics today without it. And of course, this is from last July, July 25th, 2024. So, to make sense of today's form of American politics, it's necessary to understand a key term. It's not found in standard US civics textbooks, but it is central to the new playbook of power. It's called whole of society. One of the things that I think is really important is that we understand this whole of society approach as we embark on a new administration. I guess today is the 17th, and even though I don't pay too much attention to politics, I think the 20th is Inauguration Day, which is the same as Martin Luther King Jr. Day. If I think JP and I were talking about this earlier. My husband and I were talking about this earlier, and we were like, okay, that's kind of weird. But see, again, that falls into this kind of manipulation, this kind of tactic, this kind of like whole of society behavioral approach to everything. So even the fact that they're having the inauguration on MLK Day tells you something. What kind of shit are they trying to start by doing that? They could have easily had it a week ago. They could have had it, or they could have waited a week. So what exactly is it that they're trying to prove by having it on this day? Are they trying to start something? Are you going to fall for it? The term was popularized roughly a decade ago by the Obama administration, which liked that its bland, technocratic appearance could be used as cover to erect a mechanism for the government to control public life that can at best be called Soviet style. So, what sounds more exciting to you, follower, user, internet lover, whatever? What sounds more exciting to you? Baby eating Luciferians who are making blood sacrifices, underneath the Catholic Church, or no, this is just a restructuring of a company or an agency. That's all. Just restructuring of companies and how they're going to make more money, or corporations and how they're going to make more money, or you know, contra- pay to play contracts with government and corporations. What sounds more exciting to you? The first one, of course, because it triggers all of your emotional responses. Baby eating Luciferians. Oh no, little babies are being eaten. Oh no, that's so much more exciting. Hey, I'd watch that movie. That's so much more exciting than two men in suits sitting across the table from each other and signing pay to play contracts. That's boring. And so that's the whole point of a whole society approach. And that's why Obama started it, was so that it would be bland and it would be boring and people would lose interest, right? So he definitely chose it for that reason. So I'm going to say that again. The term was popularized roughly a decade ago by the Obama administration, which liked that its bland technocratic appearance could be used as cover to erect a mechanism for the government to control public life that can at best be called Soviet style. Now, here's the simplest definition: individuals, civil society, and companies shape interactions in society, and their actions can harm or foster integrity in their communities. A whole of society approach asserts that as these actors interact with public officials and play a critical role in setting the public agenda and influencing public decisions, they also have a responsibility to promote public integrity. In other words, the government enacts policies and then enlist corporations, NGOs, and even individual citizens to enforce them, creating a 360-degree police force made up of the companies you do business with, the civic organizations that you think make up your communal safety net, and even your neighbors, or your granny. What this looks like in practice is a small group of powerful people using public private partnerships to silence the Constitution, censor ideas they don't like, deny their opponents access to banking, credit, the internet, and other public accommodations in a process of continuous surveillance, constantly threatened cancellation, and social control. So, not only am I reading this piece give you an idea of what a whole of society governance looks like, but I also want to integrate our personal attitude about responding to whole of society governance. Um, if you have this panopticon of a police state that is going to change your behavior, and I want to pause there and give you an example that we have all heard over and over and over again that was shocking to us regarding the COVID response. Mothers who or friends who had traditionally been, you know, really careful about what they put in their bodies or what they put on their bodies. Nothing artificial, everything natural, only organic food, only grass-fed meat, the most pure, organic cotton, making sure that there's nothing on their bodies that would hurt their skin or age their skin or change their cellular, you know, the way that their body responds to the world. I mean, everything was so pure and organic, and they stayed away from medications. They wouldn't even take an Advil. It was all about natural, right? It was these individuals that were the first to run full speed ahead to an experimental poison, to something that would be injected into their body, and they had no idea how their body would respond to that. So this was a real disconnect for a lot of us who were like, whoa, 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 you don't even like to wear fingernail polish, and you're willing to go out and get an injection from something that hasn't even really gone through any kind of safety trials. We don't even know. It's not only that, the injection was promoted and foisted upon us by the very person that you claim is Hitler. That doesn't make any sense. So we were having a lot of cognitive dissonance regarding this. They were having cognitive dissonance because they weren't following their own practices that they had always done for themselves. And then we were having cognitive dissonance because we were having a real disconnect with why were they doing this? Why were these people who'd always been so natural suddenly rushing towards an experimental poison of some sort, right? So that right there put us in a completely different place. Emotionally, it put us in a different place. Logically, like there was a lot of breakdowns and there was a lot of cognitive decline. There was a lot of removing critically thinking from the way that we interact in the world. And so because of that, we had to, at least me and my husband had to take a huge step back and go, all right, so we are now being governed or managed by something called this whole of society approach. So how do we respond to it? And for the most part, most of us have been responding pretty well. People have picked it apart. They have been able to diagnose what's going on. They've been able to do a lot of research and find out who the key players are behind this new type of governance, which Obama introduced to us. And so a lot of us were able to at least understand it and describe it, but that only takes you so far. If you have a whole of society approach where everybody from your doctor to granny from your school board to your city council, your work environment, your managers, your coworkers, all these people are influencing you through this whole of society approach. Your spouses, everything you watch on TV, the music you listen to. It is a panopticon of constant messaging. So how do you respond to that? You have to respond in the same way. Your body is the line of defense between you and this whole of society governance or managing. Your body is the only line of defense, and your body and your mind work together, and your emotions soon follow suit. So it's one thing to make a bunch of video essays over a few years like we did and say, we got this, we're going to lick this. We're going to totally get to the point where we understand it completely, and then therefore we're not affected by it, we're not manipulated by it. We are immune to this whole of society governance and their death goals. We're immune to it. That's what we convince ourselves. And over time, we had to make some changes. We changed our diet. So a whole of society approach, again, is that panopticon. So you can't just take one little aspect of your life and say, I'm going to fight this panopticon, this treacherous governance. I'm going to fight it by sitting in front of a microphone for an hour a week or making a bunch of video essays. You've got to fight it. You've got to use the whole of society approach against the whole of society approach. You have to change everything. You have to listen to your body. You have to listen to what's really making you anxious and then address those anxieties, even if they seem petty. So this is not advice because I'm not a doctor and I'm not a therapist and I'm not anything. But I'll tell you what we did. First of all, we moved. We left a city that we felt was not benefiting us. It wasn't, we felt we weren't getting the most out of life by living in that city. So we left and we moved to a place that we felt we would be happier, and it's near the Gulf of Mexico. So we made a huge life change and we took a risk. So taking risks is part of responding to, at least for us, responding to the whole of society goals, death goals, the whole of society approach. So there's that. We also stopped being vegetarians and started incorporating meat into our diet. And that's really helped. We also know that our life is spent sitting down a lot. Husband works at a job where he has to be in front of a computer 8 hours a day and do design schematics. Okay. This is very taxing on the body. Human beings aren't meant to sit in front of computers for an hour a day, let alone 8 hours a day. So we respond to that by being active. So we're active socially, and we're active in our community. And then I started doing aquafit classes 3 to 4 days a week. And he swims every day, except he swims like every other day. So we make sure that we can fit this into our life. And even if we didn't have these jobs where we have to sit in front of a computer in order to make the income so that we can pay the mortgage, even if we didn't have that and we were just like independently wealthy, or, if we had a pile of money and didn't even have to work, we would still go and do active things. We would still, go and make sure that we were exercising and doing what we needed to do for our body. But it's not just any exercise either. You need to pay attention to the kind of exercise that your body will really respond well to. I am not good at hard impact body work. I need to be in the water. My joints are, some of them are even disintegrated because of my autoimmune illness. So I have to have a different kind of exercise. So you have to look at your body. You have to understand your body on your own. You don't need a doctor to tell you what you already know about yourself. Again, not giving advice, you know, I already put it out there that I'm not a doctor, so so don't arrest me, YouTube. you know, I'm just saying what works for us. Um, so when you have this whole of society governance and this whole of society goal to kill you, which is unfortunately the goal right now. It's no longer capitalism because capitalism is dead. It's to kill you. Then you have to respond with more than just, well, I'm going to describe how they're killing us. You have to respond more than that. You've got to eat healthy. You've got to put your body in between you and that whole of society governance, which goal is to kill you. So you've got to put your body in between their goal and you, your your uh your spirit, your mind. Your body will be, if you move your body and you do things without thinking about it. Just get out there and take a walk, get in nature, ride a bike, pick up a swim class, take a pottery class, whatever. Take a singing lesson, a music lesson, and you start training your body to become sort of addicted to these things. Then your mind and your emotions will follow suit. So a whole of society response to a whole of society oppressive governance or management is necessary in order to stay alive, in order to stay vital and vibrant. I also, uh, JP is also teaching me how to play the guitar. So it's not just eating right and exercising. Like I said, take a pottery class, do something in your community that's fun, you know, go on a bike ride, take a singing lesson, take a music class, take a pottery class, do something creative, and your body and your mind will respond positively to that. Fill your life up with so many things that there is hardly any time to remember that the goal is to kill you, you know. Um It sounds weird to say out loud, but I really do believe that that's the goal. And we've seen it happen in, with the COVID experience. And one of my favorite sayings so far is, when people tell you who they are, believe them. And they told us who they were with the COVID operation, and with the launch of the COVID operation. They made it very clear, you know, who they were. So I would say that we have to really think about that. We really have to process what that really means, and not a lot of people are really processing uh, the depth of that, because it's hard to, and I don't blame people, you know. So let's move back into the article. Um, so What this looks like in practice is a small group of powerful people using public private partnerships to silence the Constitution, censor ideas they don't like, deny their opponents access to banking, credit, the internet, and other public accommodations in a process of continuous surveillance, constantly threatened cancellation, and social control. And there's an additional catch. The government, meaning the elected officials visible to the American public who appear to enact the policies that are carried out across the whole of society, is not the ultimate boss. Joe Biden may be the president. Remember, this was written last year. But as is now clear, that doesn't mean he's in charge of the party. As a modern political trope, whole of society dates to the Obama administration's attempt to pivot in the war on terror to what is called CVE, countering violent extremism. When so let me pause and continue my sort of breaking down of this article and reminding people that when the 9/11 event happened and we were our behavior was they were attempting to make modifications to our behavior by talking about we have to counter terrorism. We have to counter terrorism. This is terrorism, 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 terrorism. Remember that? It was all about terrorism. So when the Obama administration was installed, they slowly changed that language around terrorism evolved to countering violent extremism. And countering violent extremism can be anything. What I'm doing right now could be considered violent extremism, you know? So it left it really vague and it left it really open. And that's part of that whole of society approach. Because terrorism, international terrorism or domestic terrorism, when we think of it, we think of bombs dropping or we think of gang warfare. The images in our mind are very specific. But CVE, which is countering violent extremism, well, it could be anything, you know. It could be anything, And so that's one of the reasons that, the Obama administration changed that so that just by breathing and being alive, you could be considered a violent extremist. So let's go on. The idea was that by identifying at-risk individuals and then engaging them, American officials could get left of the boom and intervene before extremism led to violence. Well, define at-risk individuals and define, individuals that could be considered extreme. They're not. Everyone thinks that they're safe because you went to college and you followed the rules and you do everything that you're told and you you minded your p's and q's and you got all good grades and you got a great job and you never had any problems, that you're immune from being surveilled and possibly tagged as someone who is a violent person or an extreme person. In concept, the strategy called for empowering community-led interventions as a method of conflict resolution. In practice, the White House paired its progressive efforts at community activism with an aggressive expansion of counter-terrorist operations and drone strikes. Whole of society is a totalizing form of politics. It discards the traditional separations of powers and demands political participation from corporations, civic groups, and other non-state actors. But the true lasting legacy of the countering violence extremism model, or the CVE model, was that it justified mass surveillance of the internet and social media platforms as a means to detect and de-radicalize potential extremists. Inherent in the very concept of the violent extremist was a weaponized vagueness. A decade after 9/11, as Americans wearied of the war on terror, it became passé and politically suspicious to talk about jihadism or Islamic terrorism. Instead, the Obama national security establishment insisted that extremist violence was not the result of particular ideologies and therefore more prevalent in certain cultures than in others, but rather its own free-floating ideological contagion. Let me stop right there. Where else did we hear about a free-floating ideological contagion? We heard that from that Belgian dude, what was his name? The guy that was talking about how there's this free floating idea that it was like a mass hypnosis had taken place in society. Well, that idea that there's this free floating contagion, whether it's a virus or whether it's, attitudes that could lead to violent extremism, or whether it's, all of society has somehow decided that they must rush to take a vaccine or put a mask on or something, that was all just kind of like uh, defined as a mass hypnosis. And it's not. We're looking at a military operation. Whole of society governance comes out of like a military operation where you have to break down your recruits. You have to strip them of who they are, strip them of where they grew up, strip them of their accents, strip them of their ideologies, their belief systems, and then rebuild them up into a soldier, into an American soldier or a military soldier. That's what's happening to us. This is not some spooky mass hypnosis psychosis. No, this is a military operation. This is what whole of society governance is all about. So that, again, I want to say the Obama security establishment insisted that extremist violence was not the result of particular ideologies and therefore more prevalent in certain cultures than in others, but rather that it's this all-encompassing, free-floating ideological contagion. Oh my goodness, we could all catch violent extremism like we could all catch the virus someday. Given these criticisms, Obama could have tried to end the war on terror, but he chose not to. Instead, Obama's nascent party state turned counterterrorism into a whole of society progressive cause by redirecting its instruments, most notably mass surveillance, against American citizens and the domestic extremists allegedly or supposedly lurking in the midst. So I hope you guys understand that this is one of the reasons why when that Belgian dude, what the heck was his name? I liked him for about 5 minutes, and then I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I agree with Peter Bregan. It's not a magical, a hypnosis that everyone's under, and which is why they're running to get the shots. It's a military program. And it is possible to understand, and it is possible to conceptualize that when you're dealing with a military program, some people may be more focused on, there may be a stronger focus on certain members of the population. So I have a feeling this whole of society approach regarding the COVID operation was concentrated really strongly among the population that had, that was pretty well off. They had good jobs so that their managers and their directors and their project managers and all that could influence them. And then those people could then go home and influence their wives and children. And it spread out that way. Right. And then for those of us who, for whatever reason, even if we were in the corporate sector, we just were not as affected by this military operation. Like we had a fundamental understanding that just because it's a military operation doesn't mean that we have to follow its orders, because we're not part of this little game. A reflection on the 20-year anniversary of September 11th, written in 2021 by Nicholas Rasmussen, the former director of the U.S. National Counterterrorism Center, captures this view. Particularly with the growing threat to public safety and security posed by domestic violent extremism, it is essential that we move beyond the post 9/11 counterterrorism strategy paradigm that place the government at the center of most counterterrorism work. Instead of expecting the government to deal with terrorist threats, Rasmussen advocated for a much wider, more expansive, and inclusive whole of society approach that he said should encompass state and local governments, but also the private sector, to include technology companies. Well, especially them during the COVID operation, because as I mentioned, it was the tech industry that made the most money. Civil society in the form of both individual voices and non governmental organizations, and academia. The whole of society extremism coordinating mechanism after the rise of Donald Trump initiated a panic over Russian disinformation. Then, as a call for increased social media clampdowns during COVID, to the present, where it functions as a generic slogan and coordinating mechanism of a party state, one originally built by Obama and which now operates through the vehicle of the Democratic Party over which he presides. Remember that when this was written, this was during the time when everybody was talking about how the Democratic Party was like the worst of the two parties. I would argue that now that we are where we are, we're going to be looking at a whole of society approach um, through the Trump administration as well. It doesn't just stop because a Democrat is no longer in office. Some of the people that the Trump administration has put in his cabinet, they are all about mass surveillance. Peter Thiel, for instance, is working with, has worked with Elon Musk. Elon Musk, who is basically at Trump's side day and night. He's like living at Mar-a-Lago right now, living in a suite or something that's like $2,000, $3,000 a night, and he's racking up like room service bills. I mean, this is not the guy who claimed that he was, living in a 600 square foot, box in Texas, and he's just like the common man. And no, he is now living very well at Mar-a-Lago. So something is going on there. So we can't expect that this whole of society approach, this panopticon of surveillance and governance to control and manage us and keep us making the right decisions, we can't imagine it's going to go away in the Trump administration. It might even get worse. You have to be open to that discussion. This isn't a criticism of you if you voted for Trump. I get it. But you just have to be open to what's happening. So what the various iterations of this whole of society approach have in common is their disregard for democratic processes and the right to free association, their embrace of social media surveillance, and their repeated failure to deliver results. Indeed, even Rasmussen, while advocating the whole of society approach, acknowledges that it promises to be, in many ways, more messy and more complicated and more frustrating in terms of delivering outcomes. In other words, one shouldn't count on it working. Well, I could have told you that. Okay. When you've got so many corporations that are working hand in glove with the government to foist this whole of society approach on us, corporations and even the military are really unorganized. Half the time they don't even know what's going on. Half the time, you can't get a straight answer from your managers. So this dude Rasmussen, who's talking about how it could be messy and complicated and even more chaotic, well, duh. Spend any time in the corporate sector working, and you'll see that it's very unorganized. I'm not sure anybody really knows what they're doing. So that's actually one thing that could work in your favor if there is a lot of chaos and confusion with this whole of society government, that could be kind of fun. I mean, that could actually work. That can actually help you because if you don't, you know what I'm saying? If there's a lot of chaos, then you can just laugh at it and it's meaningless. So don't be afraid. That's another thing that we have. That's another attitude that we've embraced. My husband and me, uh, in response to this whole of society governance, is there is no more fear. We're not afraid. So our decisions that we make in life are not fear-based anymore. Think about how many times a day you make a decision in your life that is, if I don't do this, then this might happen. That's a fear-based decision, and you can't get anywhere in life if you're doing fear-based decisions. At least that's my opinion. Again, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not like an anthropology expert. I'm an armchair anthropologist. I'm not a real one. I just play one on TV. So that's our attitude is that for us, what's worked for us is to stop the fear-based decision-making process. So, oh no, if we don't do this, then this might happen. You can't get anywhere in life if every decision you make is based on fear, in my opinion. Okay, so not that such flaws. So again, these flaws that I'm talking about are the fact that this Rasmussen guy was like, hey, look, this whole of society approach may be more messy and more complicated and even more frustrating in terms of delivering outcomes. So not that such flaws are disqualifying in the same way that a particular politician's poor standing with voters did not seem to encourage the party from anointing them as long as they can be treated to serve its interests. The whole of society strategy remains attractive regardless of its outcomes, because it extends the party's authority over formerly independent centers of power. So, when you are talking about this unelected agency called the Department of Government Efficiency, which right now is nothing more than a Twitter page, it could extend authority over formerly independent centers of power. That is something to be aware of. Indeed, whole of society is a totalizing form of politics. As the name implies, it discards the traditional separation of powers and demands political participation from corporations, civic groups, and other non-state actors. Mass surveillance is the backbone of the approach, but it also consolidates a new class of functionaries who all directly or indirectly work for the party's interests. This is exactly how the party carried out its mass censorship during COVID and the 2020 election by embedding government officials and party-aligned experts from the for-hire world of nonprofit activism inside the social media platforms. The result, as I chronicled in an investigative essay last year, was the largest campaign of domestic mass surveillance and censorship in American history, often censoring true and time-sensitive information. That is a huge indictment. What kind of society is it that foists the largest campaign of domestic mass surveillance and censorship in history, knowing full well that it would censor true and time-sensitive information? What exactly was that information? What true and time-sensitive information was censored? Was it the fact that our American citizens, ranging from toddlers to the elderly in care homes, to soccer moms, to working dads, to professors, to theologians, to pastors, to rabbis, that we're all dying at a huge rate because of drug overdoses. Was that time sensitive and important information that was taken away from us? And would that have informed us when we were told that there was a virus that was killing people? If the United States citizenry had known that we had reached the highest level of deaths that we've ever reached as a result of drug overdoses, do you think that if we had all known this, that when the news came out that a deadly pathogen and a deadly virus was, taking over the globe, do you think that we would have sat back and said, yeah, but what about all the deaths of the the drug overdoses? And we're not talking about junkies. We're not talking about people addicted to drugs. We're talking about toddlers in daycare. What are they putting fentanyl in the juice boxes at the local daycare center? Why is, Granny who's in a really nice care home suddenly dying of a fentanyl overdose or a drug overdose? Why is, dad who goes to work every day and provides for his family suddenly dropping dead of a drug overdose? No, these are not drug addicted people that were dying. And yet, over the last 4 years, between 24 or 5 years, between like 2019 and 2024, 500,000 Americans died of drug overdoses. That's why so many people I know that are really concerned about the epidemic go, you say COVID? Huh, I say fentanyl. There was no virus, there was drug overdoses, and this is my opinion based on data from the CDC and from the NIH. You had every community. Now, this is what's key right here. You had every community coming out and talking about the drug overdoses and how worried they were. You had the religious community, the conservative community coming out and saying, whoa, 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 my 21-year-old beautiful cheerleading daughter who's never done any drugs has suddenly died of a fentanyl overdose and she goes to a Christian college. How did that happen? My kid drank a juice box at the local daycare center and died of a fentanyl overdose. How did that happen? The trans community was also coming out and saying, why are all these trans people suddenly dying of fentanyl overdoses? The LGBT community was coming out. The Black community was coming out. You see, we had everybody coming together slowly coming together, putting aside their differences and talking about the real issue, which was plaguing this country. Hundreds of thousands of people from all walks of life were suddenly, out of nowhere, dying of drug overdoses. People who were not addicted to drugs. So, and then suddenly, COVID. Suddenly the story of COVID erupts. You see? That's that whole of society approach. You can't come together. You can't put aside your differences and talk about the things that really matter, not according to the state. So let's move on. So this is the part where I said it was the largest campaign of domestic mass surveillance and censorship in American history, often censoring true and time-sensitive information. To avoid the appearance of totalitarian overreach in such efforts, the party requires an endless supply of causes, emergencies that party officers with funding from the state use as pretext to demand ideological alignment across public and private sector institutions. We saw this with the Black Lives Matter movement, where every corporation in every retail market that had an online presence was throwing a page up in front of their website, if you went to their website, like say you went to, I don't know, target.com, the first thing that you would see would be a black screen that said Black Lives Matter, we stand with Black Lives Matter. So it was that whole of society behavioral integration across a panopticon of every possible influence out there had this on their screen. These causes come in roughly two forms: the urgent existential crisis. Examples include COVID and then the much hyped threat of Russian disinformation. And you could even lump in climate change to this existential, hard to pin down crisis. And then, of course, victim groups that are supposedly in need of the party's protection. And that's where you get your, that's where Black Lives Matter comes in. That's where you get your, um, they call it diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. It's also called ESG goals. So this past month included one of each. Many observers misunderstood the downfall of Joe Biden and his swift replacement by Kamala Harris, seeing the switch made without voter participation. They decried it as a coup. But that is a kind of category error that assumes an intact democratic process was subverted by outside forces. In reality, if Biden is still aware of anything, it's that the party state system that just removed him from power is the same one that installed him in the first place. So rather than a coup, Biden's precipitous decline forced into public view a political maneuver that would ordinarily have been carried out behind closed doors. But nevertheless, it was an orderly transfer of power, with party bosses Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi firmly in control of the process. Now try to imagine the GOP attempting a similar replacement of Donald Trump and see how quickly your mind fills with images of mass protests and open revolt by Trump supporters. Only the Democratic Party establishment could pull off such a move months before the election. How? So I want to pause there and I want to say that what this author is saying is that they carried out this, this transfer of power, which people were calling a coup and all this, not for the purpose of itself, but to see if it could be done. And it was kind of a practice run. We can imagine that this type of process will be the norm now. It's like Katrina wasn't to Hurricane Katrina, that happened on the Gulf Coast in 2004, 2005, almost 20 years ago. It wasn't for a land grab. It may not have even been to raise insurance rates. It was for no other reason, in my opinion, than to see if it could be done, because it wasn't a natural occurrence. It was a weaponized military operation to see if it could be done. It was a practice run. Can we do this? You think we can do it? Can we destroy a whole region? Can we weaponize the weather? Let's see. And so they tried it with Hurricane Katrina and the Gulf Coast, and it worked. And over the last 20 years or so, how many bizarre, out of the blue hurricanes have we witnessed since then? And devastating hurricanes like Hurricane Helene. So that's what I'm saying, is that this weird political transfer of power, this where we're allowed to see Joe Biden decline his faculties declining. We're allowed to see that publicly. We were allowed to people were just automatically like referring to Harris as the one who'd been in charge over the last 4 years when she was only vice president. She wasn't really the president, but people were led to believe that. And then they were like, wait a minute, this feels like a coup. This whole like underhanded process was to see if they could do it. And it worked. So now they can do it again. Just like with Katrina. Because the Democrats have at their disposal that whole of society political machinery, which this week was operationalized in service of a new cause, getting Harris elected in order to prevent the crisis of Russian fascist, white supremacist democracy killing barbarism that is Trump. This explains why prominent media outlets pivoted in unison to insist that Harris was never the White House border czar, despite their own coverage from 2021 referring to her as border czar. One such article in Axios blamed the Trump campaign and Republicans for falsely tagging Harris with the border czar title, which the article alleged she never actually had. Hours later, the article was forced to post an Orwellian correction stating that Axios was among the news outlets that incorrectly labeled Harris a border czar in 2021. So this is very confusing, and that's what a whole of society approach is about. It's about gaslighting. Oh, no, we never said that. Yes, you did. It's on record. No, we never said that. So it's gaslighting, it's lying, it's making it's doing the classic corporate never ask for permission, only forgiveness. That sort of attitude is very corporate. So that's exactly what they did. And that's what a whole of society approach is all about. It's the same thing with Zuckerberg. Oh, well, we did some bad things. We squelched and silenced so many important voices because, I'm part of this whole of society governance. So sorry. Please forgive me. I just have curly hair and like to go, surfing. That's basically his response to it. But they're still going to feed the large language models and still feed AI and make humans irrelevant. So the tell here, the way the system today functions very differently from the one that you, if you're over the age of 30, grew up with, is how fast things change on a dime. How Kamala Harris took command of the Democratic Party in 48 hours, the New York Times breathlessly panted yesterday morning. Now, this was back in July of 2024. This article. So keep in mind, that I'm reading it 6 months later. It is hopeful to imagine that it was Harris's extraordinary grit and leadership, largely hidden until now, that enabled her to take over the party so swiftly. But the truth is actually less dramatic. The party was delivered to her because she was selected by its leaders to act as its figurehead. That real achievement belongs not to Harris, but to the party state. The question you might have is how it managed to put up a new candidate for president in just a matter of weeks. The answer is that the party had repeated opportunities over the past 10 years to train its whole of society apparatus in the rapid coordination of mass events. This was the payoff. And don't think for 1 minute that it won't happen again. This was all a practice run. The other great cause this month arrived on July 19th when Vice President Harris' husband, Doug Emhoff, introduced a proposal for new anti-hate legislation. After holding an interfaith coalition building meeting at the White House, Emhoff announced that the Biden administration would soon release a new plan for combating Islamophobia. Okay. Why is the husband of the vice president doing anything? Has that ever happened before? So think of when Obama was president and Joe Biden was vice president. Did we ever hear of Jill Biden, the vice president's spouse, coming forward with legislation? Maybe she did, but I mean, this just seems really weird, right? What exactly does the vice president's spouse do? I mean, I just thought they lived their own life. I don't know. I guess I'm naive about this stuff. I just thought that, I've just figured he ran a company and just continued his work while she did her thing. I don't know. The plan comes out of the same White House initiative launched last year to counter anti Semitism that promised a whole of society effort, including increased scrutiny of social media companies and calls to counter disinformation and misinformation. Herding Jews into the whole of society embrace is a useful way to turn nominally Jewish institutions, which here includes the Anti Defamation League, which advised and endorsed the administration's whole of society national strategy, into controlled subsidiaries of the party while wresting control over the Jewish narrative. Thus, the constant need to invoke Islamophobia every time evidence of anti Semitism is presented. Oh my God. So, this whole of society approach is also about pitting these two demographics against each other. It's so silly. By erasing Jewish particularity and conflating all kinds of bigotry in an indistinguishable beige of generic hate, the party shuts up demands that it actually do something about anti-Jewish violence, something that only racist Islamophobes see as a specifically Jewish issue. At the same time, it justifies expansive blunt force interventions into institutions across the entire society, since they are all supposedly equally susceptible to promoting hate and extremism if they are allowed to operate outside of the party state's surveillance apparatus. Wow, what a mess. Over and over again, the answer to the generic category of hate is increased regulation and censorship of social media. Under the auspices of coordinating between the corporate and civic sector, activist groups aligned with party interests are used to monitor powerful corporations, especially in the tech sector. Protecting Jews from hate, in other words, demands granting the party state more power to reward allies and punish political opponents. That is precisely why Tablet's editors have warned American Jews to oppose laws and other political initiatives claiming to protect them from anti Semitism by censoring hate speech. In a world in which people with minority opinions are interestingly subject to the full force of the whole of government or the whole of society being brought against them by a narrow group of powerful people, Tablet wrote, we have an existential interest as a people in supporting free speech and constitutional rights for others on the historically sound principle that they will soon be coming for us. One can imagine Kamala Harris using the whole of society push to enact various equity initiatives, which she has championed in the past. But equally, if Trump wins in November, which he did, the same tactic will be used to coordinate the spontaneous resistance movement of government groups, media outlets, and billionaire funded nonprofits who carry out the functions of the party state. It is this party state itself that is incompatible with democracy, and the whole of society is what it demands. So that was from Tablet. That's the reading this week. Regarding the whole of society governance that we are currently in, will even be in it under the Trump administration. So what I want to do is I want to go back to the response that we have here in this household, and on this platform in general, the response that we have to this whole of society governance or this managing. One of the decisions that we came to is that we act in compassion, and we act in forgiveness, and we act in concern for our fellow man. Some people think, well, compassion and concern and forgiveness, these things come naturally. No, they don't. You have to work at it. You have to really do some inner work. You have to do some shadow work, they call it. You have to work at it. You have to work at everything. It's not these things don't just come naturally. And as we're moving further and further into this whole of society panopticon, this crazy, overbearing, manipulative government and governing that wants to change the way we behave, we're now dealing with an aspect of that that is through AI and the large language models. One of the reasons that we got off social media, or at least we got off Meta, was because we were really concerned about how these language models would be used in general. They will most certainly be informing the whole of society approach. And they will also create a lot of pain for innocent people. And so that brings me to the recent video that, for some reason, was suggested to me on my YouTube channel. So you know how, like, I have a YouTube channel, and when I go to my YouTube channel, it'll tell me, recommended for you. Well, out of nowhere, an Alison McDowell video showed up, and I was like, okay, I haven't watched anything from her in a while, and we have this really great video called Lifelong Learning that we made based on her understanding of sort of these pay-to-play contracts, her interest in what's happening to the kids in the schools goes way beyond 2020. I think it goes I think she's mentioned sorry. I think she's mentioned that it goes all the way back to like 2016 or 2017 or something like that. So we did a video called Lifelong Learning, and you can find it. Oh, can you find it on our YouTube channel? I think you can still find it on our YouTube channel, but it's also on our Rumble channel as well. I would recommend listening to it. Now, this was when we were first doing video essays, and so the sound, the music that we chose to support our script, we probably could have gone a different way, but most people got a lot out of it. Most people really appreciated that we were able to synthesize the information that she brought out regarding this sort of control of children that starts, and the way children are shaped. It starts in utero and goes all the way to, your deathbed. That's the whole of society too, that the Obama administration introduced to the American way of life and how we function in society, which is pretty horrible. So, language learning models are feeding AI, and they're feeding ChatGPT. This video here, I'll share the screen. Okay, so that's Alison McDowell, and this is her video. I'm not going to play it. I just want you to see it. AI as a questionable interloper of mortality. What will come of ChatGPT mirroring our psyches? Or our psyches, sorry, mirroring our psyches. So you can go there and you can watch it. Again, not in the habit of promoting other channels that are way more popular than I am. They don't need me to promote them. But I had a real concern over what happened to her. So apparently what happened is somebody who maybe disagrees with her, I guess, or somebody who she maybe rubbed the wrong way. I don't know. We don't all get along, whatever. We're all only human. Somebody went to ChatGPT and fed information into ChatGPT about her and her work. And what resulted was this individual's opinion of her was then reflected in ChatGPT. So it's pretending to be non-biased. It's pretending not to have any bias, but in reality, it was his own bias that was fed into this program, and then it was reflected back to him. And she apparently watched them do this, watched the whole thing go down. And my takeaway is that she was really hurt by this. And I was hurt by it because it was so ugly. Um, I hate using the R word, but it was actually in JP when I was telling him what happened. He was like, "Well, that sounds like rape." Anybody would be disturbed by this. Anybody would be upset by this. I mean, and I was watching her in the video and she looked visibly upset. Now, of course, her words show that she's strong and she's breaking it down and she's effectively communicating what it really is about, and she's keeping it focused on how this could really be problematic for the future. But she was hurt by it. I was hurt by it. Other people were hurt by it. And so this is again, we have to recognize that these models, these language learning models, AI, ChatGPT, all of these things, they are not here to benefit us. The fact that this individual, he could have done something different with it. The fact that he used it to confirm his own bias and in order to what? Prove a point? It just was so disturbing, and it tells me that it's no wonder we have such a high rise of childhood suicide now. This is a fully grown, actualized woman who's gone through hell and back. I mean, and that's another thing too, is these AI models and these language learning models. If you're going to research somebody and want these models to confirm your own bias, then you can't claim that it's just pure fact if you're not including context. She went through a lot over the last couple of years. I guess a divorce, and had to move across country, left everything she knew. I mean, for this person to do this shows that there's something wrong with society, in my opinion. Using these models to hurt people or to confirm an erroneous bias, is not, it's not healthy, right? And that's one of the reasons we got off the Meta platform, is because we knew that any interaction that you have on these social media pages, including where I am right now, and who knows, maybe the same thing will happen to me someday. Who knows, maybe it already has. I don't know. But it's like you're feeding into the model, and then people will use whatever information the model has. They can manipulate it and use it to confirm their own bias and then weaponize it against you. They can use it as extortion. They can use it to, like what this person did with Alison McDowell, is they used it to hurt her. They used it to just abuse her, to show that they had the power, that they could do that. That sounds like rape to me. That doesn't sound like research. JP and I used ChatGPT once when it first came out, like during its first iteration, and this was only like less than 2 years ago. We used it to help inform us what routes to take when we moved across country. Um, what's the easiest way to drive across country with a U-Haul trailer behind us, driving in a, you know, in a car that could pull a certain amount of of weight, and what mountains will we go up, that kind of thing, like specifics. Let's see, let's see what Carrie said. Um, so, I want to make sure that I'm not offending anyone. Well, I see. Well, yeah. I I think a lot of people, Carrie is mentioning how Allison, her personality can be difficult. People have difficulty with her. Um and so right. And that she, when she was on Facebook, she was blocking people. She was blocking a lot of people on Facebook. Yeah, she hurt a lot of people. But I hesitate to say that that is somehow that somehow makes it okay. You know. Um I used an example the other day with JP, and I said it feels like it he's the one that said it looked like she'd been raped, and I was like, okay, well, let's talk about what that means. If an individual, a woman, is dressed uh scantily and is at a bar and had too much to drink and was running around kissing every guy she could find and was behaving erratically and pissing off women and pissing off wives and doing all sorts of crazy stuff to bring attention to herself, and then is assaulted, um does that somehow justify the assault? I'm so I think that there's been some growth. How's that? There's been some growth with me. I would I mean, I'm growing every day, right? I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to step out of my old biases and issues, and just be in a place of, choosing that path forward. And Allison did hurt a lot of people. She blocked me. She blocked a lot of people. Um, she was trouble. All of that aside, though, I don't think she deserved for her information that she was sharing to inform the public. I don't think she deserved for it to be used as a weapon against her, to traumatize her in such a way that it was palpable in her video. That was so hard to see, another person going through something like that. Um But yeah, Carrie, I totally get what you mean. I mean, it was a rough few years, wasn't it? Um, yeah. So I think that now that we have now that we've gone to the other side, we're on the other side of all this, right? And we are all concerned about the ways that AI and ChatGPT can be weaponized against us. Um, I think we can focus on that and try to, we could probably move beyond the stuff in the past, you know. Um the thing that really just kind of uh drove it home for me, the thing that really just grabbed my attention and made me go, okay, this is exactly what I was hoping would never happen. And I mean, I kind of knew it would, but I was hoping it would, if it was going to happen, maybe in the future, not now. And it happened, which is people using the AI models and the AI system and the language learning models, using it to confirm their own biases. And that can be taken any way you want, you know? I hate to go there, but a lot of people do, so I'll go there. The very attractive 16-year-old daughter that you might have, somebody online thinks that she's really hot and deserves to be sexualized. So that bias of the way that she looks will inform the AI and inform the language learning models and turn her into something she is not. Okay? Just because we have an informed bias about someone doesn't mean we can use it to weaponize them. You know, we have to equally move past our biases so that we don't create something that isn't even true and that is only going to destroy people, destroy reputations, and destroy lives. It's frightening, you know, and that's why I shared, one of the reasons I shared this this article, this whole of society approach, learn this term, whole of society, because it's part of the language learning models. It is so penalizing, and it is such a police state now that the AI and the large language models, these learning models, are going to take innocent people and the words that they've used, or the actions that they've done online, at least in the past, and going to feed into the model. This is how we will be policed, you know, so that a completely innocent person could be accused of things and have to pay fines or even do jail time for something that they didn't do, because the model spit out some information that they could potentially do, become the person that we have a bias that they are. You see what I'm saying? It's this is really dangerous. This is beyond dangerous. This is like horrifying. And so I watched this horror film play out, or this horror story play out in real time, when I realized the gravity of what Alison McDowell went through when this person informed ChatGPT of his own bias against her. And then what came out was a confirmation of that bias. Oh, yes, you're right. She is, da, 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 whatever. No, you know, our biases are skewed. It's just because my personal experience with someone is one way does not mean that someone else's personal experience with that same person will equal mine. It'll be a completely different experience. So there needs to be context as well, and there just wasn't. This isn't how I want to be governed. I don't want to be accused of things or turned into something that I'm not because of someone else's bias against me. And now we have language models that will confirm our bias, because that's all that it is. That's all AI is. Confirming our crazy biases about things that aren't even halfway true. So maybe go and listen to this. Maybe see what her approach to it was, which was very on point. She didn't talk about whether it hurt her feelings or whether she was damaged by it. She stayed on point. But I felt the pain on her behalf, and I felt the deep compassion and concern for her. Um, you know, it's not fair. It's not right. It really needs to stop. If I was the parent to the world, I would say every single person is cut off from AI. It is bad news. It's like a bad, it's like a drug or something. It doesn't benefit anyone. It's not good. So that ends my broadcast. I want to thank you so much for joining, and of course your comments. I'll be back on January 24th, or will I? I know that we're going to New Orleans next week. So yeah, I should be able to do a Friday broadcast. We're not leaving on Friday. So yeah, so I'll be back on January 24th, which is a week from today. And I may continue with this book, The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. I may do that. I may find another article that I feel is relevant to what's happening today. Thank you, Carrie. It's nice to see you too. I appreciate that. So you came over from Facebook. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm eating a little bit of crow now, because when I first started the broadcast, I was like, well, it seems like a lot of my followers or a lot of my viewers didn't follow me over to YouTube or Rumble or wherever I am, and whatever. That's okay, since we got off Facebook. But you did. So thank you. That's at least one person, right? So if you feel like sharing this around, if you feel like you got something out of it, yeah, go ahead and share it. But I wanted to end this broadcast with reminding people that this whole of society approach towards this sort of this death goal, which is really hard to say out loud, but I feel that that's what it is. It requires you to have the same kind of response to it, a whole of society response. To just be informed or to inform others is not enough. You've got to put body work into it. You've got to, you know, take walks, go on bike rides, swim, eat healthy, have community interaction with people, even people that piss you off, even people that you might not agree with. Have that interaction with them. Pick up a musical instrument, see what it feels like to strum a guitar, maybe take a singing lesson, join your community Y, have a whole of society approach in your own little world to the whole of society governance that the establishment is foisting on you as well. Gardening too. Get your hands dirty, get out there, and which I need to do. JP's the gardener. I'm not. So I need to get in nature more. That's another aspect that I know that I'm lacking. I do the aquafit class 3 or 4 times a week. I have learned how to play a little bit of guitar. I'm continuing with these Friday broadcasts. I'm doing a lot of fun things in the community that bring me joy. I've changed my eating habits. I've changed my drinking habits. I don't drink as much alcohol as I used to. Not that I was a drunk or anything. I just was like, oh, I could probably scale it down to cocktails on the weekends only, instead of, oh, hey, we're going out to dinner. Let's have a cocktail, that kind of thing. So everything in moderation. Some things, you can still have a piece of cake. You can still enjoy life. We still have wine with dinner, but focus on responding to this panopticon of mass surveillance and this desire to change your attitude about living. Have a whole response to that. It's really important to put your body in between that messaging so that your mind is clear, so that you can teach your mind to become addicted and your heart to become open and into things that are healthy and will really edify you and lift you up. Okay, so I hope you got something out of it. So I know that January 20th is around the corner. We'll see what happens. And who knows? Maybe when I go live again on next Friday, it'll be a whole different world. We'll see. Um, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I will see you in a week. Thank you so much for joining today. It means a lot. Have a great weekend. Bye.
You can help us continue our work by becoming a patron at patreon.com/bookofhours, or leave us a one-time donation at paypal.me/bookofhours, or you can use Cash App. Thank you.